This is a video that I've wanted to make since I first ever started this channel. In my opinion, it's one of the most fascinating rabbit holes ever to have developed on Reddit. I'm not really sure how to summarise it in a couple of sentences for this intro, but if you're interested in cults and conspiracies and mysteries, then I think you'll really enjoy this video. If you enjoy mysteries, true crime, disappearances and the occasional conspiracy, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. I also have a Patreon, so if you're interested in supporting the channel as well as accessing some bonus content, I'll leave a link in the description. Chris Cantelmo studied biochemistry and biophysics at Yale University. He owned a medical company, GL Sciences, as well as other companies before this. He was a well-educated and presumably at one point a well-respected member of society. So how did someone in that position so drastically deteriorate to the point where he debatably became a cult leader? It seems that Chris's journey into spiritualism began when he was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. He began using DMT and sometime after went into remission. This led him to believe that the DMT had cured his cancer. DMT is a powerful hallucinogenic drug. It's often referred to as the spirit molecule due to the intense psychedelic experience. Like most drugs, it's often used for fun, but some people also use it for spiritual reasons. It's not uncommon for people to feel like they have woken up or become enlightened after using it. Chris was one of these people, and in addition to believing it had cured his cancer, he also believed it could cure a range of illnesses and disorders from AIDS to autism. While those who possess some level of critical thinking skills might say that anecdotal evidence proves little and that correlation does not always imply causation, Chris's followers were taken in by this and genuinely believed that he had managed to cure his own cancer. Only he hadn't. He actually posted a video saying that he never even had cancer and that he just made it up for publicity.
Hey, before anyone wants to do an expose on me about cancer, I never had brain cancer. As far as I know, I had never had any form of cancer. But I do believe that DMT will cure it. It will cure all your diseases.
But then he went back on this and again started claiming that he had cancer and had cured it with DMT. This is one of the many lies and inconsistencies that you might find when researching this man.
I had the worst form of cancer. Atheism, and DMT cured that.
I honestly have no idea whether or not he ever had cancer. As far as I'm aware, he never posted proof, but regardless, I probably don't need to explain why Chris's supposed miracle cure probably wasn't the safest option. At best, he could give a cancer patient false hope, and at worst, people could suffer serious side effects as a result of taking the drug that he's recommending. While it's very difficult to overdose on DMT, and it's questionable whether or not anyone has died directly as a result of taking it, there are some very worrying side effects such as hypertension, seizures, flashbacks, and long-term psychosis. Chris promoted using it 3 times a day, but stated that he sometimes used it up to 10 times a day, which is obviously very risky. He seemed to change his mind on whether or not he supported so-called conventional cancer treatments, sometimes implying that they were toxic and other times saying that his method could be used alongside these other treatments. He seemed to differ from some quacks in the sense that he genuinely seemed to believe what he was saying. He wasn't just promoting some kind of snake oil and refusing to try it himself. He also wasn't profiting financially from these claims, if anything, quite the opposite. Most Reddit users who were aware of Chris and his claims first heard of him when it was brought to their attention that he would gild countless posts about him or comments on his posts. He first ever started posting on r/DMT, where he was welcomed for his long posts on the drug, but also for giving gold, silver or platinum to many replies. It's impossible to know how much money he spent doing so. Some guessed upwards of $100,000. He basically paid for many users' Reddit premium subscriptions for years. I'm not sure if anyone took him up on this, but he even offered to pay the expenses of any cancer patients that wanted to visit him and try to cure their cancer with DMT. This resulted in a 3-day ban on Reddit. He also paid at least one person's college tuition fees and sent many others money via PayPal. While some genuinely believed his claims about DMT and the other crazy things that we'll get to soon, others only stuck around to profit from his generosity. Regardless, it was clear that this was not about making money for him, and he clearly had plenty of it to spare. Not that any of this makes his claims any more credible, but it does go to show that I think he genuinely believed what he was preaching, and his main goal was simply to get his unfounded message out there. While his beliefs on DMT are debatably what he is most well known for, they only really scratch the surface on Cantelmoism, the so-called religion that he founded. Let's take a look at the principles of his religion on his website. There is a section titled Discoveries of Chris Cantelmo which lists his beliefs. If you don't want to listen to me read them all out, feel free to skip ahead a minute or two, but I feel that it's important to include all this directly in Chris's words in order to fully understand his claims. 1. There is a God. 2. God emits a cosmic broadcast of electromagnetic waves. 3. Humans and all other living creatures with a nervous system can receive information from God's cosmic broadcast while their neural network is enabled by DMT. 4. Instinctual behaviour in animals results from the behavioural instructions delivered to each organism via the cosmic broadcast. Imagine that each species has its own decryption key, so it interprets the cosmic data, set according to its own specific behavioural needs. 5. Aliens are now present on Earth and hyperactive in an effort to save the Earth from an environmental disaster. The aliens have recognised Chris Cantelmo as the only human well versed enough to speak to the hearts and minds of every type of human. Aliens have demanded Chris to deliver the aliens' message, stop polluting and warmongering and overpopulating, or we will unleash an unstoppable plague and lethal worldwide epidemic. 6. Einstein's energy equation needs to be updated. 7. The second law of thermodynamics is wrong. The universe is getting increasingly organised and energetic, and its end state is already determined as a super complex wonderworld. 8. Free will in humans is an illusion, and the end state of every living thing follows suit. The consequence of this fact is anxiety should evaporate, since our individual actions are irrelevant to the outcome at all times. People should do the most enjoyable thing at every waking moment. 9. The nervous system of all living creatures is both a computer, information processing system, and an antenna which both broadcasts and receives electromagnetic waves in exactly the same way as a PC or Mac contains a CPU and a Wi-Fi circuit. DMT enables the Wi-Fi and increases the clock speed of the bio-CPU by quantum orders of magnitude above default mode of normal adult human brain function. 10. There is a DMT cycle in mammals in which DMT and hormones are inversely proportioned. The higher the level of hormones, the lesser the quantity of DMT produced by the pineal gland in the brain. DMT production is stopped altogether in humans at puberty and reinitiated in late adulthood. 11. The mental health syndromes called schizophrenia and autism are one and the same and result from a relative overabundance of bioavailable DMT. From here on, the syndromes can be unified as autophrenia. Autophrenics are geniuses and were created by God to be leaders of humanity, and lesser, normal adults were too stupid to see this in modern times. In ancient times, autophrenics were rulers. 12. Shakespeare, Galileo, Da Vinci, and all other historical geniuses, and probably Jesus himself, were autophrenics. Moses was either autophrenics or inhaled DMT released by burning acacia bush and saw spirits and received God's message. 14. Our modern industrialised world, particularly fluoridisation of water supplies and being told not to stare at the sun, has resulted in calcification of our pineal glands and an interruption of the natural DMT cycle. Staring at the sun and drinking deionized pure water rejuvenates pineal function. 15. Adding DMT to an adult brain via orally active ayahuasca or by vaping DMT crystals allows people to see spirits which are always around us but otherwise invisible, including a multitude of guardian angels voluntarily assigned to each of us. 16. A near-death experience occurs when the CO2 levels in the brain get so high that the pineal gland releases what it believes is the final dose of DMT into the brain, which is meant to enable our souls to be delivered back to God. This is why almost all near-death experienced people report seeing angels and aliens. 17. Nitrogen narcosis in scuba divers and anyone who breathes compressed air results from DMT being released in the CO2-enriched, oxygen-starved brain. 18. The euphoria delivered by laughing gas, nitrous oxide, at the dentist, or by doing whippets is created by the release of DMT by the brain. If you want to do DMT but do not have access to the chemical, just inhale nitrous oxide and you will get a sense of the DMT experience. 19. DMT has allowed Chris Cantelmo to unify the four fundamental forces in physics into one force, electromagnetism. The weak nuclear force, the strong nuclear force, and gravity are all manifestations of EM over distance. The only reason the notion of multiple forces originated is because gravity and its effects were clearly understood by everyone. When electricity was discovered later, it was assumed to be a separate force. A look at the force equations for EM and gravitation shows that they are identical. There is no such thing as gravity waves, and the LIGO detectors detect tectonic plate movements, not gravitation. Kip Thorne, Nobel Prize winner for his LIGO project, is an uber genius, but was led astray by the notion that gravity is a separate force. 21. Modern medicine and vaccines only make our immune systems weaker and are the source of all human suffering. God gave us all the immunity we need, and medical intervention should only be undertaken in life-threatening emergencies. Vaccines are the problem, not the solution. 22. A direct experience of God is vital and essential. All religions are formed after a charismatic human has God revealed through an experience with DMT. Religions fail by claiming exclusivity of the divine. Religion is a source of evil, as certain as it is a force for enlightenment. 23. Money is the ultimate source of evil and results from greed. Money allows people the luxury of treating others poorly. When money is eliminated, peace will be restored to Earth. 24. Darwin's natural selection occurs at the species group level, not the individual level, and this explains altruism, heretofore a mystery to evolutionary biologists and psychiatrists. 25. Freud and Jung were well-meaning but wrong. The subconscious does not exist. Dreams foreshadow future events, and when that future event happens, we feel a déjà vu. 26. When matter is created by condensing light waves into particles, matter stays with us into the present and antimatter recedes into the past. Matter and antimatter are reunited at the end of the universe. 27. If Chris Cantelmo isn't the second coming, is anyone capable of so being? 28. Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead rule play Dark Star. So there's a lot to unpack there. To summarise some notable points, DMT is good, God and aliens exist, Chris knows better than Einstein and is in fact the second coming, vaccines and fluoridation of water are bad for you, staring into the sun is good for you, and money is evil. Some of these already sound a bit culty. It sounds like it could be like the beginning of some kind of Jonestown scenario. The sun gazing and DMT are potentially dangerous things to be promoting, and the idea that vaccines and fluoridation of water is unhealthy is kind of worrying. It very much gives off a vibe of everything you've been told is wrong, they were all lying to you, let me try and open your eyes to what's really going on. We can already see that many of these principles are based off conspiracy theories that have no proof backing them up. And lack of proof is something that comes up time and time again when researching Chris. He always claimed that his research was about to be published, but of course it never was. Whenever he was asked to prove his claims, he either just completely dodged the question, or told the person asking that they wouldn't believe him anyway, or told people who were already trying his methods to simply take more DMT and stop doubting. Chris made so many claims that contradicted themselves. He'd speak of something as if it was fact, and then sometime later completely go back on it without even acknowledging that he ever thought different. We could spend hours and hours talking about all the crazy things that Chris believed, but I don't think we'll gain much more from analysing the specific principles here, but rather from reading between the lines. It's hard to speculate on the mental state of someone that you don't know, but these ramblings were clearly not coming from a stable mind. Chris himself even admitted that he suffered from schizophrenia, but he didn't think that it was a bad thing. He thought that it made him a genius and allowed him to contact the spirit world and allowed him to see the world as it really was. So to answer the question of how Chris ended up here, the short answer would be schizophrenia mixed with hallucinogenic drugs. I'm not sure how long ago Chris was diagnosed with schizophrenia, whether it was before or after he began using DMT. This could have either worsened his condition or facilitated it. But he said himself that he believed that DMT caused schizophrenia, and he even encouraged it. He thought the hallucinations were real. Now that we've analysed Chris's beliefs and the principles of Cantelmoism, I think it might be a good time to actually look at whether or not Cantelmoism could be classed as a cult. Chris did have followers, but claimed that Cantelmoism was a religion rather than a cult. I feel that cult is often a word that is overused and misused, which is important because if we start calling any kind of group a cult, then it kind of lessens the impact of the word, and people might not take a genuine cult so seriously. Let's take a look at a checklist of cult characteristics and see how many apply to Cantelmoism. The group is focused on a living leader to whom members seem to display excessively zealous, unquestioning commitment. Yes. The group is preoccupied with bringing in new members. Yes. The group is preoccupied with making money. No, but money is indirectly relevant to the recruitment of new followers. Questioning, doubt, and dissent are discouraged or even punished. Yes. Mind-numbing techniques such as meditation, chanting, speaking in tongues, denunciation sessions, debilitating work routines are used to suppress doubts about the group and its leader. Not exactly, but drug use could possibly fall under this, and he offered to pay for his followers to visit him, so maybe this had something to do with this. The leadership dictates sometimes in great detail how members should think, act and feel. For example, members must get permission from leaders to date, change jobs, get married. Leaders may prescribe what type of clothes to wear, where to live, how to discipline children, and so forth. Chris does dictate how followers should think and act, but I don't think they had to get permission from him to make their own life decisions. The group is elitist, claiming a special, exalted status for itself, its leader, and members. For example, the leader is considered the Messiah or an avatar. The group and/or the leader has a special mission to save humanity. Yes, Chris claimed he was the second coming, and some of his followers referred to him as a god. He also believed he needed to save the world from the aliens. The group has a polarised us versus them mentality which causes conflict within the wider society. Yes. The group's leader is not accountable to any authorities, as are, for example, military commanders and ministers, priests, monks, and rabbis of mainstream denominations. Yes. The group teaches or implies that its supposed exalted ends justify means that members would have considered unethical before joining the group, for example collecting money for bogus charities. Somewhat, he also emphasises doing what you want in every moment, which could potentially lead to unethical behaviours. Ethics aside though, he definitely promotes things that most people would think were dangerous. The leadership induces guilt feelings in members in order to control them. Yes, he even faked his own death on Twitter a while back to manipulate his followers. Members' subservience to the group causes them to cut ties with family and friends and to give up personal goals and activities that were of interest before joining the group. Potentially, you can definitely see how that might happen, but I don't necessarily think that that was Chris's intentions. Members are encouraged or required to live and/or socialise only with other members of the group. Not really, but Chris did offer to pay for his followers to come visit him and said that he wished he had the space for thousands of homeless people to live on his land, some of whom have been drawn in by his beliefs and claims. So overall, I don't think it would be unreasonable to call Cantelmoism a cult. It checks most of the main boxes. For some time, Cantelmoism grew. However, as I said before, it was clear that some of the followers were only sticking around hoping to gain from Chris, whether that was in Reddit awards or actual money. After some time though, Chris realised this and stopped sending people money.
I'm not sending out money to people anymore because I realize that just perverts the whole situation. People get money, they think they deserved it.
When Chris's generosity declined, so did his following, who now didn't see a reason to stand by a man whose beliefs they only defended for financial gain. If you cherry-picked comments, you might see Chris as a pretty crazy guy with some outlandish beliefs, but still a good person nevertheless. Someone who paid people's tuition fees and allowed homeless people to take a shower in his house whenever they wanted, wishing that he had space for thousands of them to sleep in his backyard. But if you dug a little deeper, you might find a different side. Someone who is pretty angry and intolerant of any criticism. Someone who even went to the lengths of debatably bullying some people, including cancer patients, who tried to stop him spreading false information.
Christine, exactly how huge a moron are you? How lazy and stupid can you be? You're a disaster. Shut the up. No one wants to hear you're a miserable, lazy idiot. Now purify the stuff and shut the up. Get off your lazy, non-committal. Make a difference. Stop creating plastic. Stop being stupid. Make a difference. Call your local news stations. Get them to get off and make a difference. I've had it. You guys are idiots.
He was caught out multiple times using alternate accounts to manipulate his followers, and took action against people who tried to expose him. He would snap like a moody teenager on Reddit or Twitter, and speaking of teenagers, that's the demographic that he targeted for his cult, which is pretty worrying. Teenagers are more likely to be indoctrinated, especially when they're being showered with gifts. There were also reports that Chris had been inappropriate with some of his young followers. I'm yet to see any proof of that. or at least proof of anything illegal, but he probably did cross boundaries. I don't want to mislead here. Again, I haven't seen any proof that he actually came onto any teenagers or made any suggestive comments in relation to himself, but according to some ex-followers, he did overstep the mark a bit. A post was made on RBI from a teenager who got to know Chris through all this. They actually had a somewhat positive view of him and didn't believe Cantelmoism was a cult. So it does seem that they might have been manipulated, as Chris apparently told them that they were his best friend and that one time he almost ended his life but they saved him. That's a lot to put on a teenager and does sound potentially manipulative. I'm not saying there aren't situations where an adult and a teenager can be friends on some level, and there's nothing more to it, but there's definitely something a bit weird about a guy in his 50s making a habit of befriending teenagers and telling them this kind of stuff. In order to gain insight into the situation, I contacted a user on Reddit who was one of Chris's followers to ask them a few questions. Here's the conversation we had. At what point did you become a follower? When I got my first platinum. How old are you? Turning 17 in 2 days. Did Chris find you on r/teenagers or another subreddit? No, I found him because I was looking up what an award was. Can you describe your relationship with Chris? How much contact did you have with him on a personal level? Did you DM or text, etc.? We texted all the time. He was a really great person. Did you ever feel that Chris was inappropriate with you or crossed any boundaries? Chris was never inappropriate. Sometimes he just needed someone to talk to because he was lonely, but never inappropriate. Were there any moments you nearly stopped supporting Chris? I did support Chris till the end, never questioned him because his ideas were always somewhat backed up. Did/do you believe all of Chris's claims about the DMT, aliens, staring into the sun, etc., or were you just there for the awards he was giving out? Sungazing is a scientifically proven thing, and DMT, yeah, don't recall the alien thing, but I think he was a smart dude. Would you still class yourself as a Cantelmoist, and do you still follow Chris's teachings? I think Chris overall a GOAT, and I still do consider myself one. Do you think Cantelmoism is a cult? Cantelmoism isn't a cult, more just like a group of people with a leader who gave us stuff, kinda like a sugar daddy to a whole bunch of people, and we just had to be his friend. Some of us, however, actually cared. He was my friend. Thanks to Lodricodine for answering my questions. For obvious reasons, I'm going to avoid analysing and speculating on these answers, but it's there for you to make your own mind up. I'm now going to list off a few things that he did that put his followers off, though for some of these I couldn't find any solid proof. Seeing as r/Cantelmoism was shut down, Chris's Reddit account was banned and he deleted many of his videos, I'm having to rely mostly on posts from Cantelmoism Exposed, but comments seem to corroborate each event. Chris uploaded videos showing himself driving on acid and causing a scene in the middle of the road. He bullied a girl who was considering taking her own life and tried to get someone fired after they stopped following him. He was known to harass many other users who simply disagreed with him. He used his followers like his own personal army, encouraging them to jump on people who even slightly criticised him. He impersonated one of the moderators on Cantelmoism Exposed and seriously tried to ruin his reputation. He sent death threats to various people. He made a whole subreddit dedicated to making fun of his brother, who he hated for some reason. But that's just a quick list. You can find many more on Cantelmoism Exposed. The police were called to Chris's home on more than one occasion, either by his friends or followers who were worried about him, or people who never were followers but just saw that this man was ill and needed help, but of course that didn't go down well. What was interesting about his downfall was that some of his followers turned against him but still classed themselves as Cantelmoists. A now deleted user made a post on Cantelmoism Exposed. It read, "Yeah, I'm posting on here because it seems this place is more of an anti-Chris than anti-Cantelmoism, and we are all anti-Chris now too. Chris is crazy as hell right now, doxing mods and trying to outcast members, and when people call the police to his house to help him, or try and message him to calm him down, he flips. So he's in isolation right now, and we aren't going to feed him with attention. I have always had some respect for the man because of some good conversations we had and some of his points on the universe and beliefs. However, he ruins everything because every time he makes a good point, he puts in a lot of drama in between it all. I'm just letting Exposed know that we don't support Chris currently and we don't plan on ever welcoming him back because of his bad behaviour. As far as I've seen from the mods, and I am perfectly okay with that too. And to whoever is making negative comments on his videos, stop. You are only feeding his behaviour, just don't even let him have the satisfaction of deleting your comment. It was almost like his own creation had outgrown him. Now you might question how Reddit admins allowed this to go on for so long. He was banned a few times for 3 days, but that was about it. But he was spending thousands and thousands of dollars on the site. They probably didn't agree with what he was doing, but they weren't about to look a gift horse in the mouth. If they had, maybe the cult wouldn't have developed into what it did. Maybe things would have ended differently.
You've reached the Los Angeles Police Department Foothill Community Police Station. We are currently open. If this is an emergency, please hang up and dial 911.
Hi, how are you? I wanted to know if I wanted to do a wellness check on someone, is this the right place to call? Yeah, his name is Chris Cantelmo. I talked to him last week, and I kind of check in on him periodically, and I haven't heard anything from him in a week, which is unlike him.
Chris's followers and friends hadn't heard anything from him for a few days. Despite being pretty consistent in posting on Twitter, his last tweet had been on the 2nd of November, all his known accounts on Reddit had been banned, and his subreddit was long gone too. While most had turned against him by this point, he still had a handful of loyal followers who stood by him throughout it all. Until the 24th of November 2019, when Chris Cantelmo, at the age of 57, decided to take his own life. His body was found a day or two later by someone who later commented on a Reddit post explaining what they saw. The cause of death was determined to be sharp force injuries of the neck and forearms. As soon as the news was posted on r/dead redditors and subsequently shared on various other subreddits, conspiracy theories began spreading. Some people believed that this was not Chris, that he'd somehow faked his own death. He'd done it before, right? Only there was no body last time, just him pretending on Twitter. One user claimed that they had spoken with one of Chris's alternate accounts after his alleged time of death. Apparently they communicated just like Chris, using insults and acting strange in the same way he did. While this would certainly have been strange for the user, not at the time realising he was dead, they were likely in contact with one of his followers on that account and not Chris himself. Another conspiracy theory that did the rounds on Reddit was that Chris was actually murdered. People thought that the circumstances were suspicious and that he was right about DMT curing cancer, so someone, I guess from Big Pharma, killed him to cover up his discovery.
Chris Cantelmo's death needs to be investigated by an independent investigator not related to the government. His family and everybody in the world should push for another autopsy done by somebody who is not a coroner working for the government, but an independent investigator.
But as tragic as Chris's death was, it wasn't a massive shock to those that knew him personally, as well as anyone who had watched the situation unfold. He had been hospitalised before after psychotic episodes where he'd attempted to take his own life, and anyone could see that his mental health was deteriorating in the months prior. He'd gone from being kinda strange but still reasonable and capable of debating different views, to an intolerant and angry man who exploded and plotted against anyone who disagreed with him. Some would even argue that there were warning signs before things started really going downhill, such as him spending so much money on Reddit. Stories like this often get sensationalised, and people like to believe it's a lot more mysterious than it actually is. While it's definitely a fascinating rabbit hole, I don't think there's any mystery or huge conspiracy at play here. The sad reality of the situation is that a seriously mentally ill man started self-medicating, which made his illness even worse. He tried to spread his message to the world, and things just kinda got way out of hand as his illness slowly consumed him. I can't and don't really want to justify his actions, but having researched him pretty thoroughly, I don't think I could confidently say that Chris was a wholly bad person. I can't remember when I first ever heard of Cantelmoism, but it was before Chris's death. I went down the rabbit hole and just kind of forgot all about it after a while. Then I heard a few months later that he was dead, and even as an observer, someone who had no personal ties to Chris or to Cantelmoism, it was kind of surreal. This was once a successful man, who could have done great things. He had a family, but they disowned him because of all this. He was lonely, the attention probably made him feel slightly less so, but when people started to turn on him, to him it probably seemed like the whole internet were against him. He did some questionable, erratic and morally wrong things, there's no denying that, but I still just think it's really tragic that this was a man that needed help, and he never got it before it was too late. But we also can't forget about the followers. While some, like Dracodine, had only positive experiences with Chris, there were undoubtedly many others that were harmed in some way or another by Chris and his actions. most of whom were vulnerable, as most people who end up joining cults are. Whether this was because they were young or they were suffering from schizophrenia or cancer or one of the many other illnesses that Chris claimed that he knew how to cure. There's definitely a morbid fascination to this case, but if there's any meaningful lesson to be taken from it, it's that mental illness is no joke. I'll leave some links in the description for services focusing on mental health. I really encourage you to use them if you or anyone else you know is struggling. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments. Did you see any of this unfold at the time on Reddit, or do you know of any other cults that developed on the internet? If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing and checking out my Patreon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Thursday in a new video.